Looking at Barbie's learning style, it said VAK, which is visual, audio, and kinesthetic. It was developed in 1979. The fascinating thing about this is that Walter Burke Barbie was actually born in 1926, and he got a bachelor's in science, a master's, and a PhD from Northwestern University. It's fascinating to see how he participated and even laid some groundwork for our learning styles and our learning strengths. And when he actually started, he wanted to set out to really investigate the modality of the strengths of individuals, and he wanted to see how people really could learn. He identified 3 different channels, namely the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic. And through his research, along with some colleagues named Malone and Swassing, he discovered that individuals are approximately 30% visual strength, 30% mixed strengths, 25% auditory, and only 15% kinesthetic. So within this visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning style, it falls under an umbrella of the neuro-linguistic programming, which is called NLP. And I know this is a little bit deep, but it encompasses the 3 most influential components that are involved in our human experience: the neurology, right, the languaging, and the programming. So NLP investigates these interactions between how the neurology, that's the mind, the linguistics, which is the language, and the programming, which is the behavior, and how they all interact. So let's look a little bit at the visual piece. So visual learners actually learn by seeing, which is obvious, right? But they have a high ability for visual recall, and they prefer to learn mostly through visual representation, such as graphs, posters, maps, even displays. And you'll see that they use a lot of hand movements when they talk. They may even have a tendency to look upward when they're thinking. So how can you tell if a learner is really a visual learner? Well, they rely both on their language and spatial interpretations of language or of information, which means that they're going to really want to write everything down. These are your great note takers, right? And even if they never look at that information again, it's going to be embedded in their memory because they wrote it down. These kind of learners have a really quick ability to recall facts, faces, places, and locations of items as long as they were able to actually see it. Now, the audio learner is a listener, and they really favor that listening ability, and they have a high ability to recall anything that they hear, especially through repetition and summaries. They love discussions and lectures and stories and podcasts. Now, this kind of a learner is going to tilt their head to the side, and they actually will even use some rapid eye movements when they concentrate or recall information. So how can you tell if a learner is a visual learner? Is an auditory learner, right? This auditory learner is really simpler to identify than others because they talk to themselves all of the time. They may not even vocalize, but you're going to see them move their lips as if they're reading all the time. And they're going to struggle with written information, especially reading from a text. So it helps if they were to read out loud. Our last one is the kinesthetics, and they're the doers, and they have to interact with their environment, very hands-on, especially interactions between themselves and their body. Now, they're going to recall events and informations that are related to the feelings of a physical event or the tactile side. And they're going to learn best through like field tips, physical activity, manipulations, and they tend to have a really high difficulty sitting still, so they need a lot of frequent breaks. Now, you can tell this kind of a learner because they're motivated, they learn best through touch and movement, and they need to be constantly stimulated. They'll bounce a lot. You know those people whose legs bounce? Yeah, that's usually that kinesthetic learner. And this learner is going to focus best if they get to move around a lot. And they really love the big picture. They're not very detail oriented. So Barbe, Swassing, and Malone in 1979 discovered that when you match an instructor with the student of the same modality, meaning that if they're both visual learners, right, that's their learning strength, that the performance of the student is going to be enhanced. It's going to be higher. And they propose that educators should really match their modality with the student's modality, meaning that if you're an auditory learner, you should be teaching auditory learners. And when this is done, these students had an incredible ability to achieve and retain information.